The town of Argenta was platted in 1866. Its name derived from the Latin word for silver, referring to the Kellogg lead and silver mine located just about 10 miles north of Argenta. In 1870, before the railroads reached central Arkansas, the majority of the small North Shore population was African American and included many former slaves. Most economic opportunities in the area were connected to natural resource extraction and ferry work on the Arkansas River for passengers and cargo. In 1869, the Little Rock and Fort Smith Railroad began construction of a line with a freight yard and depot around the present-day 4th and Poplar streets in Argenta. The Bering Cross Bridge was completed in 1873 and connected the Cairo and Fulton rails that operated on either side of the Arkansas River. Before the bridge was completed, cargo had to cross the Arkansas River by ferries, which were slow due to limited space and the time of loading and unloading to either side. There was also a risk of cargo loss by common ferry accidents. The Arkansas River was notoriously shallow throughout much of its course, and frequently sunken cargo and steamboats created dangerous submerged hulks and snags. In 1872, at least 117 steamboats had succumbed to the Arkansas River. The Bering Cross Bridge played a significant role in improving transportation efficiency for cargo and also helped connect the growing communities of Argenta and Little Rock. With the completion of the 3 railroads near here by 1874, Argenta was able to boom for decades as a major railroad hub and thriving community. The population on the North Shore would grow to become the second largest population in the state until the 1940s. Argenta was largely a working-class town and attracted many European immigrants with its railroad employment opportunities, as well as the local mines, mills, factories connected to the transportation industry. Stores, saloons, and inns concentrated around the central railroad hub of town, and neighborhoods were within walking distances of these businesses as well. The ideal climate and central shipping location led J.W. Vestal to relocate his growing Vestal nursery business near Bering Cross Bridge. The major success of this business was majorly responsible for the city of Little Rock's unsuccessful attempt to annex the Vestal property in 1891. This action helped spur Argenta to become politically incorporated, separate from Little Rock, since in 1890 it was forcibly annexed as Little Rock's 8th ward. In 1901, the town of North Little Rock was formed as part of a plan led by local politician and businessman William C. Fawcett to reclaim Argenta from Little Rock. The passage of the Hoxie Walnut Ridge Bill by Northside businessmen working with Fawcett ended up giving North Little Rock the disguised ability to reclaim Argenta into North Little Rock in 1904. For years, the history of this house was muddled in local legend involving a mix-up between the identities of 2 real residents of Argenta. The story was that the original owner of the baker was a famous black jockey from England named Albert E. Colburn, who built the home for his family with money from his winnings. But his time in the house was cut short due to surrounding racial prejudice in the neighborhood. The truth is that there was a famous black jockey from England in Argenta around the time, but he didn't build the baker. In 1895, he built what would become known as the Engelberger House at 2105 North Maple Street, the only other surviving Queen Anne-style home in North Little Rock. His name was Alonzo Lonnie Clayton, and he became famous by becoming the youngest person to win the Kentucky Derby in 1892 at the age of about 15 or 16. The first owner of the baker was Albert E. Colburn, but he was a white watchmaker. The mix-up possibly happened from the construction dates of the Engelberger House matching that of Colburn's business construction nearby. One other reported local legend surrounding the baker was that it was built by a black doctor from London who was building the large house for his fiancée, but his fiancée broke off the engagement shortly after the house's completion, leading him to sell the home that he planned to move into with his future wife. Based on historic census entries, city directory pages, and land deeds, the house was definitely first owned by Albert E. Colburn. The construction of the Baker House began in 1876 and was finished in 1897 by owner Albert E. Colburn. Colburn was a jeweler and watch repairman from New Hampshire that lived in Argenta, Arkansas with his wife Estelle and 3 children. His business was on the same block as his newly constructed house, leading locals to refer to the area as Colburn's block, and that was this corner of the property just right over there. While he was a jeweler by trade, Colburn also owned a drugstore within the same building on the corner of West 5th and Washington Avenue. In 1897, the house had 25 electric lights installed, as well as a low iron fence surrounding the property. That spring, he welcomed 2 boarders, McDonald and Bates, to his house that worked as brakemen for the railroads. That same year, Colburn sued the Arkansas Pump and Pipe Company for alleged water damages to his home with an estimated $3,000 worth of damages caused by plumbing leaks, or about $90,000 today. The contract for an addition that is the current kitchen area began in 1896, but it wasn't completed until 1898. On Sunday, March 3rd of 1901, at about 1:30 a.m., a fire broke out that destroyed Colburn's business building as well as others nearby. Part of Colburn's house, which was behind the store here, was also damaged. He suffered property loss of about $12,500, which would be about the equivalent of $379,369 today. The only goods in his store that survived were those stored in a safe, but even those were damaged from the fire. The insurance only covered about 1/4 of the loss. A young employee of Colburn named George Ludwig, a 23-year-old, suffered serious injuries when he tried to save the property, the business building. When he burst open the rear door of the store, he created a current of air that caused a harsh wave of flame to lash out at him. He suffered significant burns to his head, face, and hands. It was predicted that he may lose both of his eyes and hands, but days after the accident, his physician thought he wouldn't lose anything, only be disfigured by the burns for the rest of his life. Not long after the fire, Colburn sold his business and home. The Davidson family became the new owners of the house in 1901. While the house looks like a single-family mansion, for much of its time it has been used as a boarding house. The working-class Davidson family, who next owned the property, did live in it themselves, but they rented out the upper-level rooms to many men who worked with the railroads or were firefighters. George Porter Davidson himself also worked as an engineer for the Missouri Pacific Railroad in Argenta. He immigrated to Arkansas from his family's farm in Georgia to work. While he worked 11-hour days outside the house, his wife Katie Davidson kept the house, renters, and 4 kids in order, as well as handling the washing, canning, cooking, and sewing. During the family's first year in the house, Katie Davidson contracted smallpox, which led the whole family to be quarantined at the home for 6 weeks. 2 to 3 men usually rented a room together, so the house may have had as many as 20 boarders living in it at times. The second staircase and side door kept foot traffic away from the family space of the house, which the men would usually only enter to pay their rent. Katie Davidson reportedly didn't want to buy the house unless it came with Colburn's upright rosewood piano and the painting that hung above it in the parlor called Hiawatha's Wooing, which was an illustration of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's narrative poem. In the doorways of the parlors, there were long draperies called portieres beneath the glass transoms. When the Davidsons lived there, they cooked on a coal stove with a large range. They did have running water as well. Daughter Margaret Davidson Mullins recalled how the lighting fixtures in the house were gaslit. The Davidsons sold the house to the Baker family in 1916. The Baker house got its name from the family that owned it the longest after 1916, the Bakers. It was bought by Cadmus J. Baker, who moved in with his wife Annie Baker and their 3 children. Baker was the North Little Rock School superintendent from 1904 to 1906. And afterwards, he got into real estate and became a loan broker on Washington Avenue, the business center of North Little Rock, until 1939. A comparison of Sanborn map details from the years 1913 and 1939 show that the patio work on the southwest side of the house was added during Baker's family's ownership of the house. Census records show that C.J. Baker, like the Davidsons, rented out much of the house. One of C.J. Baker's daughters, Lillian Baker Lewis, lived in the house from 1916 to 1937 and returned to live in it from 1969 to 1977 before selling it to Dr. Hampton Roy Sr. The Baker had seen better days by the time Dr. Frederick Hampton Roy Sr. purchased it in 1977. But he put in significant work to restore the house and even got it listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. Dr. Roy Sr. is a renowned ophthalmologist from Little Rock with a passion for historic preservation and local history. He pioneered new types of cataract surgeries and other eye treatments. He has also authored many books in his medical profession, as well as some on local histories and architecture, such as Charles Thompson and Associates, Arkansas Architects, 1885 to 1937, and How We Lived, Little Rock is an American City. After completing restoration work on a Little Rock house designed by Charles L. Thompson, Dr. Roy Sr. got to work on the Baker, doing major updates on its guts with new plumbing and electrical wiring. There was a lot of termite damage to the exterior wood. The cone-shaped tower roof was gone after perishing in a fire caused by a lightning strike, and a portion of brick wall and floor around the kitchen had to be replaced since it was sagging. The cone-shaped roof had to be rebuilt on the ground and lifted into place by a crane. The current tower roof is not actually as tall as the original. The stained glass window in the front parlor window and its matching glass door to the inside butler pantry were added by Dr. Roy Sr. based on similar period pieces. His work restoring the house was finished in 1981 when he and his family were removing layers of paint and varnish from the interior woodwork. They discovered a vast amount of beautiful curly heart pine throughout the house. Around 1986, P. Allen Smith did some landscaping work for the family after recently returning from his time in England studying landscape architecture and history. The curly heartwood pine gets its name from its intricate wavy rings that create a holographic effect caused by a rare mutation in certain pine trees. This woodwork is an artifact of the once vast virgin longleaf pine savannas of the southeast United States. Harvesting and milling of the old-growth longleaf pine was made possible on a large scale due to the spread of railroads and advanced milling machinery in the later half of the 19th century. The longleaf pine lumber industry would peak in 1907 when 1.4 billion cubic feet of timber was harvested. This wood would be used in construction throughout the U.S. and even exported to Europe. The curly pattern seen throughout the Baker is said to occur in only about 0.5 to 1% of longleaf pine trees that are often identified by their very bumpy exterior. Wood that is not plain is typically called figured wood, like curly heartwood pine. There were various types of figures, either occurring more naturally in certain species from burls in tree growth or emphasized from cutting technique. Figured wood is most often used to create statement pieces or musical instruments, making the extensive use of curly pine throughout the Baker unusual. Either A.E. Colburn or his contractor saw the beauty of the many deformed pieces in his lumber batch, or sought this particular pattern out for the stairs, railings, or for the construction. Inside, the curly heartwood pine can be seen as the baseboards, posts, frames, stairs, railings, and doors. Rather than be cut into the usual intricate molding patterns of the period and style, most of the pieces are in simple shapes with smooth surfaces. This may have been done to either reduce milling costs or to let the curly pattern serve as the main decorative detail throughout the house. Today, this wood can only be found reclaimed from old homes or by recovering timber from river bottoms that snagged and sank during river transportation in the late 1800s to early 1900s. It can easily fetch a price of $30 per square foot. After Dr. Roy Sr.'s restoration work on the Baker, the house stayed within his family until it was bought by John and Sherry Sanford in 1993, who raised their 13 children there, a baker's dozen. The house changed hands several times with different bed and breakfast business attempts in the 1990s and early 2000s. The Baker was most recently bought by Stacy and Nathan Hamilton and marketed as a boutique hotel, differing from earlier attempts that focused on recreating a Victorian-era atmosphere inside. The Hamiltons removed the floral, Victorian imitation wallpaper inside, had the floors redone, as well as some plumbing updates, and improved the interior lighting. The upstairs rooms have been altered for more modern use, but the curly pine woodwork has been kept everywhere and now serves as the main decor within the upscale, minimalistic interior. Like the boom of early Argenta, the Queen Anne style also flourished from the spread of the railroads in the later half of the 19th century. Industrialization and growing cross-country rail transportation made mass production and standardization of construction parts possible. The growth of the logging industry, thanks to the efficiency of railroads for log transportation and advanced milling machinery, led to the availability of mass-produced decorative woodwork. Other new materials at the time included wire nails, cheaper windows, and decorative cast metal work. This proliferation of materials also led to many homes being designed by builders and homeowners using pattern books rather than project architects. Pattern books, sometimes called carpenter's guides, were catalogs that were sometimes put together by architects at the time that featured a vast array of woodwork, metalwork, paneling, shingles, windows, spindlework, floor plans, and so on, that were either ordered from manufacturers or used as guides for measurements and assembly by the house craftsmen and carpenters. The Queen Anne style first arrived in the United States at the Philadelphia World Fair of 1876. It was the first official World's Fair in the United States in celebration of the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It was an international exhibition of art, architecture, business, and innovations. Many buildings were constructed just for the event, including two made by the British government, fashioned in an Old English revival that the United States began calling the Queen Anne style. The widespread publicity of the event led to the art and architecture featured at the World Fair to flow into the mainstream of public fashion. The American Queen Anne style popularity ran from around the 1880s to the 1910s, reaching its peak in popularity around the 1890s when the Baker House was built. The covered porch of the Baker features painted, spindled, balusters and spandrels, decorative side brackets and projecting brackets, and a spindlework entryway known as a moongate. Various East Asian and garden and architecture features were adopted by European designers and later American styles such as the moongate from Chinese gardens. A moongate is a circular opening in a garden wall that serves as an entryway as well as a viewing frame to the garden features. While the Baker's moongate is not a circle, it significantly resembles one. The windows and sills of the tower are all curved, and one original curved glass plane still remains on the lower level. The sills and lintels of the windows are stone. The third floor of the tower features patterned wooden shingles. Most are rectangular, with the middle strip being diamond-shaped. The gables of the house also feature wooden shingles, but in a mix of rectangular and fish-scale shapes around the Palladian windows. The current slate-shingled roof resembles the original, but a photo taken recently after the house was first constructed showed that the shingles on the roof and siding featured colored shingle arrangements in some places. Behind the tower is a cupola at the center of the house that can be reached by the central stairs with windows on all sides and skylight. Originally, there was metalwork along the roof ridge called cresting, made from iron or copper that resembled a dentil pattern. The point on the tower roof originally had a metal finial also. Compared to many other Queen Anne-styled homes in the state, the Baker House is fairly tame. Perhaps this is one of the reasons it remains standing today, as the Queen Anne style fell out of fashion shortly after the turn of the century and gained a reputation for being too flamboyant. The Baker is a somewhat unusual Queen Anne home due to its symmetry and brick construction, with wood only used as decoration. This concludes the history presentation of the Baker House. Thank you for coming.